Darth Vader's arrival in Westeros was a violent rupture, both of the sky and of the natural order. His vessel, a burning sphere of unknown metal, tore through the heavens above Oldtown and crashed with catastrophic force into the Honeywine River. The impact sent a shockwave through the ancient city, flooding streets and sending the citadel into a panic. Lord Leighton Hightower, roused from his reclusive studies by the city-shaking impact, descended to the Hightower's receiving hall. He found the captain of the city watch already waiting, his martial bearing struggling to conceal a deep, unsettling fear. "My lord," the captain began, his face pale despite his martial bearing. "We found a man, or something resembling one." He emerged from the crashed vessel and walked toward the city gates as if he owned them. When we attempted to question him, the captain hesitated, struggling with his own account. "He moved his hand, my lord, and 3 of my men were thrown backward without him touching them. They struck the walls hard enough to break bones." "Where is this stranger now?" Hightower demanded. "We have surrounded him with 24 armed guards in the market square, but we dare not approach closer. He has not attacked further, but he has also not responded to our commands or questions. He simply stands there, my lord, breathing." The breathing was what struck all who encountered him first. A rhythmic, mechanical sound that seemed to echo with unnatural volume, as if amplified by some unseen means. When Lord Hightower arrived at the square, flanked by his household guards and several maesters, he finally laid eyes upon the stranger. The figure stood motionless in the center of a wide circle of armed men. His armor was like nothing forged in Westeros, smooth and articulated, covering him entirely from head to foot. A black cape hung from his shoulders, stirring slightly in the night breeze. But it was the helmet that drew the eye most forcefully, a black mask with angular features and large, emotionless eye lenses that seemed to stare into one's very soul. "I am Lord Leighton Hightower," the elderly nobleman announced, stepping forward with more courage than he felt. "You stand in my city. By what right do you assault my guards and refuse to answer lawful questions?" For a long moment, there was no response save that terrible mechanical breathing. Then the figure spoke, his voice deep and resonant, carrying a weight of authority that made even Lord Hightower instinctively wish to step back. "I am Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. Your petty authority means nothing to me. I seek the ruler of this world." The accent was strange, the words spoken in the common tongue but with an inflection none present had ever heard. Several maesters exchanged bewildered glances at the unfamiliar titles and terms. "There is no single ruler of this world," Lord Hightower replied carefully. "The 7 kingdoms of Westeros are governed by King Tommen Baratheon from King's Landing. Beyond the narrow sea lie other lands with their own rulers. If you seek an audience with His Grace, I can arrange for an escort to the capital, but you must first answer for your assault upon my men. Your men attempted to restrain me." The dark figure tilted his head slightly. "That was unwise. I go where I will, when I will. No man commands me. However," he paused, and though his face remained hidden behind the mask, there was a quality to his voice that suggested consideration. "This King's Landing. How far?" "Several weeks by horse, my lord, or faster by ship," offered Archmaester Ebros, stepping forward despite his trepidation. "Might I ask from where you have come?" "That vessel in the river is unlike any ship we have knowledge of, and your armor, your manner of speech all are foreign to us. I come from a place beyond your comprehension, Maester. From a galaxy far from this primitive world. I did not choose to come here." For the first time, emotion crept into that mechanical voice, anger, tightly controlled but unmistakable. "I was betrayed, cast into a void between realities by one who sought to escape my judgment. But I survive. I always survive, and I will find a way back to complete my purpose." The maesters were already filling parchment with notes, trying to capture every word of this extraordinary encounter. But Lord Hightower had ruled Oldtown too long to be distracted by curiosity when danger stood before him. "My Lord Vader, I cannot allow you to simply depart after injuring my men. There must be some accounting, some recompense." The dark figure turned his masked face fully toward Hightower. Though no eyes were visible behind those dark lenses, the Lord felt the full weight of that gaze, and it chilled him to his core. You speak of allowing or disallowing, as if you have any power over me. You do not, but I am not without reason. I seek information about this world, its powers, its resources. Provide me with maps, with knowledge of your kingdoms and their rulers, and I will depart your city peacefully. Refuse, and I will take what I need." Before Hightower could respond, a young maester in the crowd called out with the thoughtless courage of youth, "You threaten the might of Oldtown? We have survived the Andals, the Targaryens, rebellions, and wars. What makes you believe one man, however strange, could stand against us?" Vader turned toward the voice. "You doubt my power? Very well. A demonstration." He raised one black-gloved hand, fingers slightly curled. Immediately, the young maester began to choke, his hands flying to his throat as he rose from the ground, suspended in the air by no visible force. His feet kicked uselessly as he gasped for breath that would not come. "Stop!" Lord Hightower shouted. "Release him!" The guards raised their spears, but none dared approach. The maesters cried out in horror and confusion. Archmaester Ebros stepped forward, his hands raised in supplication. "Please, my lord, he is young and foolish. Spare him." For several seconds more, Vader held the maester aloft, making his point clear to all assembled. Then he lowered his hand, and the young man dropped to the cobblestones, gasping and coughing as air rushed back into his lungs. "That is a fraction of the power I command," Vader stated, his voice carrying across the now silent square. "I do not make idle threats. I require maps and information. You will provide them, or more of your people will suffer. The choice is yours." Lord Hightower knew when he was beaten. "You shall have what you require. Come to the Citadel. The maesters have the finest maps and chronicles in all the known world." As they walked through the nighttime streets of Oldtown, citizens pressed against walls and shuttered windows to catch glimpses of the terrifying stranger. That mechanical breathing echoed through the narrow lanes, a sound that would haunt the city's nightmares for years to come. In the Citadel's main library, the maesters spread out maps of Westeros, Essos, and the known world. Vader studied them with intense focus, his masked head moving from chart to chart. "This is the extent of your civilization? These few continents?" "It is all we know, my lord," Ebros replied. "Beyond these lands lie only rumors and legends. The world is vast, and much remains unexplored." "Primitive," Vader muttered. "No space travel, no galactic communication. You are barely advanced beyond feudalism." His attention fixed on King's Landing. "This is your capital? The seat of power? For the Seven Kingdoms, yes. King Tommen Baratheon sits the Iron Throne, though he is young and guided by his counselors." "Young and weak, then. Such rulers are easily displaced." Vader's finger traced along the map. "And what military forces does this king command?" Over the next hours, the maesters provided detailed accounts of Westeros's political and military situation. They spoke of the great houses, the recent wars, the depleted state of the realm after years of conflict. They told of the Lannisters' gold, the North's vast territories, the Vale's impregnability, Dorne's fierce independence. "And magic?" Vader asked suddenly. "Does it exist in this world?" The maesters exchanged uncertain glances. "There are those who claim mystical powers," Ebros admitted carefully. "In the east, the Red Priests of R'hllor speak of visions and flames. In the far north, there are tales of ice creatures and ancient sorcery. The Targaryens once commanded dragons through some bond we never understood. But here in the Citadel, we study the natural world, not superstition." "Fools," Vader said flatly. "I sense power in this world, primal and undisciplined, but present nonetheless. Your refusal to study it does not make it less real." Before the maesters could respond, Vader turned and strode toward the door. "I will go to this King's Landing, prepare a ship. My lord, as I said, such a journey requires." "Prepare a ship," Vader repeated, his voice dropping to a tone that brooked no argument. "Or I will take one. You have until dawn." By morning, the finest vessel in Oldtown's harbor had been provisioned for the journey north. Its captain, a weathered sailor named Jared who had spent 40 years on the narrow sea, stood on deck with barely concealed terror as the dark figure strode up the gangplank. Lord Hightower had paid him triple the usual fee, but no amount of gold seemed sufficient for this task. "We'll make good time with fair winds, my lord," Jared offered nervously. "Should be in King's Landing in 8 to 10 days. "Not fast enough." Vader stood at the bow, looking northward. Then he raised both hands, and the captain felt something change in the air around them. The winds, which had been blowing from the northeast, suddenly shifted, filling the sails from directly behind the ship. The vessel lurched forward with such sudden speed that several sailors were knocked from their feet. "What sorcery?" Jared began. "Maintain your heading," Vader commanded. "I will handle the wind." For the entire journey northward, the winds blew with unnatural consistency directly into the ship's sails. When other vessels encountered storms, Vader's ship passed through calm seas. When tides should have slowed their progress, the waters seemed to speed them along. What should have taken over a week was accomplished in 4 days. Captain Jared would later swear to anyone who would listen that he had sailed with a demon, a force of nature disguised as a man. The crew spoke in whispers of how Vader stood motionless at the bow for hours, seemingly without need for food or sleep, that terrible breathing the only sound marking his presence. On the morning of the 4th day, King's Landing appeared on the horizon. The great city sprawled before them, the Red Keep rising prominently above the lesser structures. Even from a distance, the stench reached them, that distinctive odor of 500,000 people living in close quarters. As they approached the docks, harbor guards took notice of their unusual speed and the dark figure standing at the bow. By the time they reached a berth, a contingent of gold cloaks was waiting, along with a minor functionary from the Red Keep. All vessels arriving from the south must declare their cargo and purpose, the functionary announced officiously as Vader descended the gangplank. "By order of the Crown, you must." He stopped mid-sentence as Vader walked past him without pause or acknowledgement, as if he simply did not exist. The gold cloaks moved to intercept, but the same invisible force that had thrown men in Oldtown now sent a dozen guards sprawling across the dock. "The king," Vader stated, his voice carrying over the commotion. "Take me to him now." The functionary, who had fallen on his posterior in his haste to backpedal, stammered from the ground. "You cannot simply demand an audience with His Grace. There are protocols, procedures. You must petition the hand of the king. Wait for consideration." Vader's hand moved in a subtle gesture, and the man's voice cut off as he began to choke. "I do not petition. I do not wait. You will take me to your king, or you will die here. Choose quickly." A senior gold cloak, recognizing that they faced something beyond their ability to handle, made the pragmatic choice. "I will escort you to the Red Keep, but you must understand, the Queen will have you killed if you threaten the king." "Many have tried to kill me," Vader replied as the functionary dropped, gasping. "All have failed." The procession through King's Landing drew crowds. Citizens stopped their daily business to stare at the dark figure walking through their streets, flanked by nervous gold cloaks. That mechanical breathing seemed to echo off the buildings, and rumors began to spread even before Vader reached the Red Keep's gates. At the castle itself, Sir Meryn Trant and several other Kingsguards stood watch. "Halt," Meryn commanded, his hand on his sword. "State your business." "I am here to see your king. Stand aside." The Kingsguard does not simply step aside for any strange. Vader flicked his fingers, and Sir Meryn's sword flew from its scabbard, clattering across the stone courtyard. The knight stared in disbelief at his empty hand, then at the dark figure before him. "I will not ask again." Chaos erupted in the Red Keep. Servants scattered, guards shouted for reinforcements, and within minutes, the castle was in a state of high alert. In the throne room, Queen Cersei Lannister received word of the intrusion with cold fury. "How does one man walk unopposed into the Red Keep?" she demanded of the Master of Whispers. "Lord Qyburn, where are the Kingsguard? Where are the gold cloaks?" "Your Grace," Qyburn replied with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "The reports are troubling. This intruder appears to possess abilities beyond natural explanation. He throws men aside without touching them. He commands the very air itself. The gold cloaks are terrified." "Terrified?" Cersei's voice dripped with contempt. "Of one man? Send Sir Gregor. Let the mountain remind this fool that the crown is not to be trifled with." As if summoned by her words, The throne room doors burst open. Ser Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, now more monster than man after Qyburn's experiments had brought him back from the brink of death, stood in the doorway. And behind him, striding forward with absolute confidence, came Darth Vader. The court fell silent, all eyes fixed on the dark figure. Cersei rose from where she had been seated beside young King Tommen, her face a mask of icy composure despite the unprecedented breach of protocol. "You dare enter the Red Keep unbidden? You dare approach the Iron Throne without permission?" Her voice rang through the hall. "Ser Gregor, remove this intruder. Kill him if he resists." The mountain drew his massive greatsword and advanced on Vader. At nearly 8 feet tall, Ser Gregor was accustomed to towering over all he faced. But there was no intimidation in Vader's stance, no fear in that mechanical breathing. "Another one who needs to learn," Vader said quietly. Ser Gregor swung his blade with the force to split a horse in two, but the sword never reached its target. Vader's hand shot out, and suddenly the mountain was frozen mid-swing, his entire body rigid as if caught in invisible chains. The massive sword trembled in his grip, then wrenched itself free and flew across the room to clatter against the wall. "What?" Cersei's composure cracked for the first time. "What sorcery is this?" Vader made a crushing motion with his fist, and Ser Gregor's armor began to crumple, the metal plates squealing as they compressed. The mountain, who had never shown pain even when poisoned by the Red Viper, began to make horrible sounds as his body was crushed within his own armor. "Stop." The voice was young, uncertain, but it was the king's voice. Tommen stepped forward, his round face pale but determined. "Please, stop hurting him. I am King Tommen of House Baratheon. Why have you come here?" Vader released Ser Gregor, who collapsed to the floor in a heap of twisted metal and tortured flesh. All eyes turned to the boy king as he stood before this terrifying stranger, showing courage beyond his years. "You are the ruler?" Vader studied the boy. "A child. Worse than I thought. I may be young, but I am king," Tommen replied, his voice steadying. "My mother is Queen Regent. Together we rule the 7 kingdoms. You have assaulted our guards and our Kingsguard. By rights, you should be executed. But I would know why you have come before I pass judgment." A long moment passed, that mechanical breathing the only sound in the throne room. Then, to everyone's surprise, Vader spoke with something approaching respect in his voice. "You show courage, boy king. That is rare in rulers so young. Very well, I will speak plainly." He gestured to the assembled court. "This world is primitive, divided, weak. Your kingdoms war amongst themselves, while greater threats go unaddressed. I have seen empires rise and fall across a galaxy of 1,000,000 worlds. I have commanded fleets that could turn this entire planet to ash. I seek nothing less than to bring order to this chaos." "You seek to conquer Westeros," Cersei stated, finding her voice again. "To claim the throne for yourself. Not conquer, transform. Under my rule, there would be no more petty wars between houses. No more starvation in your streets while nobles feast. No more bandits preying on the weak. There would be order, efficiency, power. And we would be your slaves," Cersei shot back. "We who have ruled for generations would bow to a stranger in a mask who speaks of distant empires and makes threats in our own throne room." Vader turned his masked face toward her. "You already are slaves, Queen Regent. Slaves to tradition, to the weaknesses of your political system, to the limitations of your primitive technology. I would free you from these chains, even if you lack the vision to see it." Tommen looked to his mother, then back to Vader. "We have laws here, my lord. We have the faith, the great houses, the bonds of fealty that hold the realm together. You cannot simply declare yourself ruler because you have strange powers." "Cannot?" Vader's voice dropped dangerously low. "Boy, I have served an emperor who ruled 1,000,000 worlds. I have broken the wills of thousands of Jedi, warriors with powers you cannot imagine. I have commanded armies that would dwarf every soldier in your 7 kingdoms. What I cannot do is let this world languish in ignorance and chaos when I have the power to reshape it." "Then you admit you mean to take the throne by force?" Qyburn interjected, his voice clinical despite the circumstances. "Perhaps we can reach an accommodation." The realm is weary from war. If your grace were to marry— I do not marry for power, Vader interrupted. I do not need the legitimacy your customs would provide. But I am not without strategy. A public display would be efficient. Before anyone could ask what he meant, alarms rang throughout the Red Keep. Shouts echoed from the courtyard, and a guard burst into the throne room. Your Grace, dragons! 3 dragons approach from the east. The court erupted in panic. Dragons had not been seen near King's Landing since the Dance of the Dragons, centuries past. Cersei's face went white. Tommen looked to his Kingsguard in confusion. But Vader turned toward the windows, his head tilting as if listening to something beyond normal hearing. Interesting, he said. So there are dragons in this world after all. The Maesters spoke of them as ancient history. Daenerys Targaryen, Cersei whispered. The Dragon Queen. She comes to claim her throne. Without a word, Vader strode toward the balcony. The court followed, driven by horrified fascination. There, in the distance, but approaching rapidly, 3 massive shapes flew through the sky. Even from afar, their size was impressive, creatures of legend made flesh, their wings beating with terrible grace. She brings her dragons to intimidate us, Qyburn observed. A show of force before parley. No, Vader said quietly. She brings them to burn you from the sky if you refuse her. I recognize tactics of domination. They are familiar to me. The dragons drew closer, and now individual details could be seen. The black one, largest of the 3, its scales seeming to drink in the light. The green one, swift and aggressive, flames already flickering between its teeth. The cream and gold one, graceful and deadly. And on the black dragon's back, a small figure in white, silver hair streaming behind her. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. Cersei named them, her voice hollow. We have no defense against this. The Scorpions are not prepared. We are at her mercy. You are at her mercy, Vader corrected. I am not. He stepped to the edge of the balcony as the dragons approached the Red Keep. They were close enough now that their individual roars could be heard. Primal sounds of rage and power that sent servants fleeing and guards clutching their weapons uselessly. Then Vader raised both hands, and the world changed. The dragons, mere seconds from being able to bathe the Red Keep in fire, suddenly stopped in mid-air. Not landed, not hovering by their own power, but frozen completely as if caught in invisible amber. Their wings were locked mid-beat, their mouths open in roars that had been cut off. Even the small figure on Drogon's back was immobilized, her face showing shock and outrage. By the 7, Tommen breathed. How? Vader held the dragons effortlessly, his breathing the only sound as the court watched in stunned silence. Then, with deliberate slowness, he began to pull them closer. The massive beasts, each weighing tons, drifted through the air toward the Red Keep as if drawn by invisible chains. On Drogon's back, Daenerys Targaryen struggled against the invisible force. She could not move her body, but her eyes blazed with fury and fear as she was drawn inexorably toward the dark figure on the balcony. Vader pulled all 3 dragons to hover directly before the Red Keep, close enough now that the court could see every detail. The beast's eyes rolled in panic and rage, but they could not break free. With a gesture, Vader pulled Daenerys from her mount, suspending her in the air before him. Then, carefully, he lowered all 4 to the courtyard below. The moment they touched the ground, the dragons were released. They roared in fury, and Drogon immediately lunged at Vader, its jaws wide to consume him. But Vader simply raised a hand, and the dragon stopped again, now caught in a crushing invisible grip that made it writhe and struggle. No, Daenerys shouted, her voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to being obeyed. Release them, Dracarys. At her command, Rhaegal and Viserion breathed fire directly at Vader. The flames, hot enough to melt stone, engulfed the dark figure completely. The court gasped, certain they had witnessed his death, but when the flames cleared, Vader stood untouched, his black armor not even scorched. Impressive, he stated, but insufficient. With a sweeping motion of both arms, Vader seized all 3 dragons simultaneously. They struggled against his power, their roars shaking the very stones of the Red Keep. But they could not break free. Slowly, methodically, he forced them down, pressing their massive bodies to the ground until their bellies touched the courtyard stones. Daenerys watched in horror as her children, the living symbols of her power, were brought low. She tried to run to them, but Vader's power held her as well, keeping her standing but unable to move forward. "You are the Dragon Queen," Vader observed, studying her. "You have conquered cities with these beasts. You have broken chains and freed slaves. You consider yourself a breaker of tyrants. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms," she declared, her voice defiant despite her circumstances. "And you are killing my children. Release them. They are not your children. They are weapons you cannot fully control. I can feel their minds, their hunger, their rage. They obey you through a bond neither you nor your maesters understand, but that bond is weak compared to true mastery." To demonstrate, Vader focused his attention on Drogon. The great black dragon, still pinned to the ground, suddenly went still. Its eyes, which had been rolling with panic, became fixed on Vader. The Dark Lord reached out with the Force, finding the dragon's consciousness, its primal will, and he bent it to his own. It was not gentle. It was not kind. But it was absolute. When Vader released Drogon from the physical restraint, the dragon did not attack. Instead, it lowered its head in submission, its massive body pressed flat against the courtyard stones in a posture of complete subservience. Daenerys cried out in anguish, "What have you done to him?" "I have shown him power greater than his own," Vader replied. "I have demonstrated that there are forces in this universe beyond fire and scales. He understands now. He will obey." One by one, Vader repeated the process with Rhaegal and Viserion. Each dragon resisted, their wills strong and primal, but against the Dark Lord's mastery of the Force, even dragons were insufficient. Within minutes, all three lay prostrate in the courtyard, their great heads bowed. The assembled court watched in absolute silence. Cersei's hand gripped the balcony railing so hard her knuckles were white. Tommen stared with wide eyes at something beyond his comprehension. Even Qyburn, usually so controlled, looked shaken. Vader turned to Daenerys, who now had tears streaming down her face. "You sought to reclaim your throne through fire and blood. You believed your dragons made you invincible. You were wrong. But you are not without value, Dragon Queen. You have proven yourself a capable conqueror and liberator. Such skills are useful." "I will never serve you," Daenerys spat, her voice breaking. "I will die first. You say that now. But you will reconsider. Your dragons are now mine to command. Your armies are an ocean away. Your claim to the throne is based on heritage and power, both of which I have demonstrated superiority over. You can die in futile resistance, or you can live to see your vision of a better world actually achieved. Choose." He released her from his invisible grip, and she stumbled forward, running to Drogon. But when she reached her beloved dragon and placed her hand on his scales, the beast did not respond to her touch. His eyes remained fixed on Vader. The choice before Daenerys was impossible. Everything she had fought for, everyone she had lost, all the miles traveled and cities conquered, all of it rendered meaningless in moments by this dark stranger who commanded powers she had never imagined. To resist was suicide. To submit was to betray every oath she had sworn. She turned back to Vader, her face a mask of rage and grief. "What are you? I am the future of this world, whether it wishes me to be or not. I am order carved from chaos. I am power without equal." He gestured toward the Red Keep, where the court still watched from the balcony. "They have spent generations fighting over a throne made of swords. I have brought empires to heal across a galaxy. This world will be mine, Dragon Queen. The only question is whether you will be part of building something greater from its ruins, or whether you will be buried in them." Daenerys looked from Vader to her dragons, then to the Red Keep where the Boy King and his mother watched. She thought of Meereen, of the slaves she had freed, of the chains she had broken. She thought of Khal Drogo, of her brother, of Ser Barristan, and all those who had died believing in her destiny. "If I agree to serve you," she said slowly, each word costing her dearly, What happens to the people, to the slaves in Essos, to the small folk of Westeros? They will prosper more under my order than they ever could in your chaos. I do not rule through love, Dragon Queen. I rule through strength. But that strength provides stability, and in stability, civilization can flourish. Your slaves will remain free. Your reforms will be implemented. But the endless cycle of rebellion and reconquest that your methods guarantee will end. It was not the answer she wanted, but it was more than she had expected. Daenerys Targaryen, who had walked into fire and emerged with dragons, who had been called Breaker of Chains and Mother of Dragons, made the hardest decision of her life. I will serve, she whispered, but I will hold you to your promises. The slaves remain free. The people are protected. Acceptable, Vader replied. Then he turned to the balcony and raised his voice. Let all who witness this understand. The old order has ended. The Iron Throne, the squabbling of your great houses, the weakness that has plagued this realm, all of it ends today. I am your emperor now. Resist and die. Submit and prosper. There is no third option. In the throne room, Cersei turned to Tommen with desperation in her eyes. We cannot simply accept this. The Lords will never. The Lords will accept what I tell them to accept. Vader's voice echoed through the chamber, though he still stood in the courtyard below. They will come. They will kneel. Or they will burn. Send ravens to every major house. Summon them to King's Landing to swear fealty to their new emperor. Those who refuse will be visited by their Dragon Queen's children, now under my command. Qyburn leaned close to Cersei. Your Grace, we have no choice. This being possesses power beyond anything in our history. Even with all the wildfire under the city, we could not. The wildfire, Cersei breathed, sudden hope lighting her eyes. If we could somehow ignite it while he's here. I can hear you, Queen Regent. Vader's voice came again, somehow both near and far. Do you truly believe I would not sense the massive cache of explosive material beneath your city? The same alchemical wildfire that burned my predecessor's enemies? It poses no threat to me, and now, he made a subtle gesture with his hand. Throughout King's Landing, in the tunnels and storage chambers deep beneath the city streets, thousands of jars of wildfire suddenly grew cold. The volatile green liquid crystallized, rendered inert by Vader's manipulation of the Force at a molecular level. Cersei felt her last hope die as Qyburn whispered in her ear. The wildfire no longer responds to flame, Your Grace. He's neutralized it somehow. We truly have no defense against him. Over the following days, the reality of Vader's conquest settled over King's Landing like a shroud. Ravens flew to every corner of Westeros bearing the same message: swear fealty to the new emperor or face destruction. The responses varied from defiance in the north to cautious acceptance in the Reach, but all knew they would have to answer eventually. Lord Eddard Stark's response from Winterfell was characteristically blunt. The North has bent the knee before, only to face treachery and death. We will need more than threats before we surrender our sovereignty to a stranger in a mask. Lord Mace, Tyrell's response was more diplomatic, but equally uncertain. The Ironborn sent crude refusals. Dorne's message was poisonously polite in its rejection. The Vale, under Littlefinger's influence, equivocated. Vader read each response with cold calculation. Then he called for Daenerys. Your dragons and I will tour the 7 kingdoms. He informed her. Each lord who defies the summons will receive a personal visit. You will accompany us and witness what happens to those who cling to the old ways. Their first destination was Storm's End, seat of House Baratheon. Lord Robert Baratheon, a distant cousin of the royal line, had fortified his castle and declared he would never kneel to a sorcerer. When Vader and Daenerys arrived on Dragonback, 3 dragons flying in formation, they found the castle sealed and prepared for siege. Vader landed in the courtyard alone, leaving Daenerys mounted on Drogon as the dragons circled overhead. Lord Robert emerged with his garrison, hundreds of armed men surrounding the dark figure. You come to my home uninvited, Robert declared. You make demands without right or reason. I am a lord of Westeros, descended from Storm Kings, who ruled here for thousands of years. I will not yield to tyranny. Brave words, Vader acknowledged. But words require deeds to give them meaning. Will you die for them? If I must. Better to die free than live in chains. Vader studied the Lord, then the assembled men. You believe you fight for freedom. In truth, you fight to maintain a system that serves the powerful while the weak suffer. But you are not without honor. Therefore, I offer you a choice. Single combat, you against me. If you win, I will leave your castle and make no further demands of your house. If I win, you and all your men swear fealty. Lord Robert laughed bitterly. What honor is there in fighting a sorcerer? You'll strike me down with your dark powers before I can swing my sword. No sorcery. No powers beyond the physical, just steel and strength. Vader drew a weapon from his belt, a lightsaber, though none present knew that name. When he activated it, the crimson blade hummed to life, casting red light across the courtyard. I will even limit myself to this blade alone. The sight of the energy weapon caused murmurs of fear among the garrison, but Lord Robert nodded slowly. Very well. Let it never be said, a Baratheon refused a fair fight. He raised his warhammer, the traditional weapon of his house. To the death, if necessary. They fought in the center of the courtyard while hundreds watched. Lord Robert was a skilled warrior, his hammer powerful enough to crush armor with each blow. But Vader moved with speed beyond human capability, his lightsaber parrying every strike. The crimson blade cut through the hammer's shaft on the third exchange, and before Robert could draw his backup blade, the lightsaber was at his throat. You have lost, Vader stated. Will you honor your word? Robert Baratheon, breathing heavily, looked into those dark lenses and saw no mercy, but also no cruelty, just absolute certainty. He dropped to one knee. House Baratheon swears fealty to Emperor Vader. The pattern repeated across Westeros. Some lords submitted immediately, impressed by Storm's End's swift fall. Others required demonstrations of Vader's power. In the Riverlands, he froze the entire flow of the Trident for an hour, proving his mastery over nature itself. At the Eyrie, he floated up to the impregnable castle without need of roads or gates, demonstrating that their defenses meant nothing. The North proved the most resistant. Lord Eddard Stark greeted Vader at Winterfell's gates with a company of his finest warriors, his children arrayed behind him. I have heard tales of your conquests, Emperor, Ned said, his voice grave. I have heard how you humble lords and command dragons. But the North remembers, and we remember that power without justice is tyranny. You speak of justice as if you understand it, Vader replied. Tell me, Lord Stark, when your small folk starve during winter, do they care about the honor of their lords? When bandits prey on travelers, does justice feed the widows and orphans? You cling to traditions that preserve your power, while offering nothing to those who need protection most. The North takes care of its own. We have done so for thousands of years. And thousands of years from now, under your system, nothing will have changed. There will still be starvation, still be war, still be suffering. I offer efficiency, order, advancement. Your honor and tradition are luxuries the weak cannot afford. Ned's hand went to his sword, but his daughter Arya's voice stopped him. Father, wait. The young girl stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Vader. You're not from here. From Westeros, I mean. You're from somewhere else entirely, aren't you? Vader turned his attention to her. Perceptive child. Yes. I come from a galaxy far from this world, from an empire that spans 1,000,000 planets. Then show us, Arya said boldly. Show us what you mean to build. Don't just tell us to kneel. Show us why we should. For a long moment, Vader studied the young girl. Then he gestured, and images began to form in the air, holographic projections drawn from his memories. The assembled Northerners gasped as they saw images of Imperial star destroyers, vast space stations, cities that stretched across entire continents. They saw technology that seemed like magic. Ships that flew between stars, weapons that could destroy worlds, medical facilities that could heal injuries thought impossible. But they also saw the cost. Images of subjugated populations, of rebellions crushed without mercy, of worlds burned for their defiance. Vader did not hide the brutality of the empire he had served. This is the power I commanded, he stated as the images faded. This is the order I enforced. It was not gentle. It was not kind. But it was absolute, and in that absoluteness, billions were protected who would otherwise have suffered in chaos. I do not ask you to love me, Lord Stark. I ask you to recognize that your current system is failing, and that I offer something better, even if it requires sacrifice. Ned Stark looked at his children, then at his assembled bannermen. If I refuse, you will kill us all? No, I will isolate the north. I will build my empire in the south. And when winter comes and your maesters tell me a winter unlike any in living memory approaches, the north will starve while the rest of Westeros prospers under my rule. Your pride will cost you every life you claim to protect. Is that the legacy you wish to leave? It was Jon Snow, Ned's bastard, who spoke next. What if we swear to you, but maintain the right to rule the north as we always have? You take fealty, but let us govern ourselves? Vader considered this. Acceptable, with conditions. Your laws will be reviewed and reformed. Your resources will be shared with the realm when needed. Your warriors will serve when called. But daily governance can remain yours if you demonstrate competence. Ned closed his eyes, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to fight to the death for northern independence. But he was also a pragmatist who had seen enough war to know when a battle could not be won. The North will kneel, he said finally, his voice heavy. But we kneel to an agreement, not to conquest alone. You give us your word on the terms Jon proposed? You have it. Ned Stark, Warden of the North, took a knee in his own courtyard. His bannermen followed, one by one, until all the North bent to Vader's will. But even as lords knelt and ravens carried news of submission, darker forces took notice. In Ashai, the Shadowbinders felt a disturbance in the patterns of power. In the ruins beyond the wall, the ancient enemy stirred. And in the depths of the earth, something old and cold turned its attention toward this new player in the great game. The Night's Watch sent word from Castle Black. Lord Commander Mormont's raven was more urgent than the others. Something is wrong beyond the wall. The wildlings flee south in unprecedented numbers. They speak of the dead walking. We need men and supplies. Winter is coming, and it brings horrors with it. Vader read the message with interest. Undead. Reanimated corpses. In the galaxy he came from, such things existed through various means. Sith alchemy, parasitic organisms, technological manipulation. But here, according to the histories he had studied, they were powered by an ancient malevolence called the Night King. This threat beyond your wall. He addressed the small council he had assembled, a mixture of former advisors and new appointments. Tell me everything. Tyrion Lannister, whom Vader had appointed as an advisor for his intelligence and political acumen, leaned forward. The White Walkers are legend, Your Excellency. They supposedly existed thousands of years ago, during the Long Night. The Night's Watch was founded specifically to guard against their return, but no one has seen them in millennia. Until now, Vader stated, the pattern is clear. As my order spreads across your kingdoms, an opposing force emerges. This is not coincidence. The universe seeks balance. Daenerys, who had reluctantly accepted a position as Vader's primary commander, spoke up. If they are real, if the dead truly walk, then all our conflicts over the Iron Throne mean nothing. The living must unite against such a threat. For once, the Dragon Queen and I agree, Cersei Lannister said acidly. She had been stripped of most authority but retained as an advisor for her knowledge of court intrigue. If the realm is consumed by ice and death, what does it matter who rules? Vader stood, his cape billowing behind him. You misunderstand. I do not intend to merely defend against this threat. I intend to eliminate it permanently. Tyrion, mobilize the armies. Every house will contribute troops. Daenerys, prepare your Unsullied and Dothraki for transit north. Cersei, ensure supplies and equipment are manufactured at triple the current pace. Your Excellency, Tyrion ventured carefully. Even with our combined forces, if the legends are true, the army of the dead numbers in the hundreds of thousands. They cannot be killed by conventional means. Then we will use unconventional means. I have faced threats before that seemed insurmountable. All of them fell. These White Walkers will be no different. As preparations began, Vader made an unexpected decision. He would travel to the wall himself, accompanied by a small contingent of advisors and warriors. This would serve multiple purposes. Assess the threat directly, demonstrate his commitment to protecting the realm, and perhaps most importantly, probe the nature of this magical menace. The journey north took weeks, even with Vader's ability to enhance their speed. As they traveled, he observed the realm he now ruled. The small folk no longer hid when his procession passed. Instead, they watched with curious awe. Word had spread of his strange powers, of how he had humbled dragons and lords alike, but also of how he had begun implementing reforms. Taxes had been restructured to be more equitable. Grain stores were being established in every region against the coming winter. Bandits and raiders found themselves facing a foe who could sense them from miles away and dispatch them with ruthless efficiency. Slowly, reluctantly, order was taking hold. At Castle Black, Lord Commander Mormont greeted them with barely concealed desperation. "Your Excellency, thank the gods you've come. The situation beyond the wall grows more dire by the day. 3 ranging parties have disappeared completely. The wildlings who make it through speak of entire villages dead, then walking again." Vader stood at the top of the wall, looking out across the vast frozen expanse. His Force senses reached out, probing the darkness. And there, hundreds of miles distant, he felt it a cold unlike any cold he had experienced. Not merely the absence of heat, but the absence of life itself. A void in the Force. A nullification of the energy that connected all living things. "Fascinating," he murmured. "It is not merely reanimation. It is the antithesis of life made manifest. A form of energy I have never encountered." "Can you stop them?" Jon Snow asked. He had accompanied the expedition north, along with several other northern warriors. "I can stop anything," Vader replied with absolute confidence. "But first, I will understand them." Against all advice and protocol, Vader descended the wall alone. He walked north into the haunted forest, his black form stark against the snow. The men of the Night's Watch watched from the wall's top, certain they had witnessed their new emperor's death march. For 3 days, Vader walked alone through the frozen wilderness. His armor protected him from the cold through systems beyond the understanding of this world's metallurgy. He needed neither food nor sleep in significant amounts, his Force-sustained body capable of enduring extremes that would kill ordinary men. On the 3rd night, they came. The Whites emerged from the tree-lined corpses animated by fell magic, their eyes glowing with eerie blue light. Dozens at first, then hundreds, converging on the single dark figure who stood alone in a clearing. They moved with unnatural silence, no breath misting in the cold air, no sound of footfalls despite their number. Vader waited until they were nearly upon him. Then he raised his hand. The Force surged out from him in a wave of pure power. Dead flesh meant nothing. These creatures had no life force to manipulate. But they had structure, cohesion, the magical energy that animated them. Vader grasped that energy, and he crushed it. In an instant, hundreds of Whites collapsed like puppets with cut strings. Their bodies fell to the snow, truly dead now, their animating force dispersed. But Vader knew this was merely the advance guard. From deeper in the forest, he felt them approaching beings of greater power. The White Walkers themselves, ancient creatures of ice and malice. 4 of them materialized from the darkness, their crystalline armor reflecting the moonlight, their weapons forged from ice that could shatter steel. They regarded Vader with what might have been curiosity, if such inhuman faces could express such emotion. Then, as one, they attacked. The battle was brief and brutal. The White Walkers moved with supernatural speed, their ice blades seeking Vader's flesh. But against a Dark Lord of the Sith, even their ancient magic proved insufficient. Vader's lightsaber carved through ice weapons and crystalline armor with equal ease. His Force abilities let him anticipate every strike, counter every attack. Within moments, 2 White Walkers lay shattered on the frozen ground, their bodies dissolving into pools of freezing water. The remaining 2 retreated, and Vader let them go. He had learned what he needed to know. The White Walkers could be killed. Their magic, while powerful, was not infinite, and most importantly, they were not immune to the Force. But as he turned to walk back toward the wall, Vader felt a presence that dwarfed the White Walkers. Something vast and ancient focused its attention upon him. The Night King himself, leader of the dead, had become aware of this new player in the war between life and death. In a frozen waste far to the north, beyond even the lands the wildlings dared travel, the Night King stood atop a mountain of ice. His eyes, burning with cold blue fire, saw across vast distances. He had waited millennia for this moment, preparing his army for the final conquest. And now, when victory seemed assured, a new element had appeared. The Night King was ancient beyond measure, created by the children of the forest as a weapon against the first men, only to break free of their control and become a threat to all life. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had waited through ages of warmth for winter's return. He was patient, methodical, and utterly without mercy. But he was also intelligent enough to recognize a threat. This dark figure who walked alone through his domain, who destroyed whites with a gesture and slew White Walkers with ease, this was dangerous. This required attention. The Night King raised his arms, and throughout the frozen north, the dead stirred. Not just the recently fallen, but ancient corpses preserved in ice for thousands of years. Giant whites, massive creatures that had once terrorized the living. Entire armies of the fallen, accumulated over millennia of patient gathering. The army of the dead began its march south. When Vader returned to Castle Black 3 days after his departure, he found the fortress in a state of controlled panic. Rangers reported seeing movement to the north unlike anything in living memory. The entire horizon seemed to be shifting, a tide of death flowing toward the wall. "How many?" Lord Commander Mormont demanded. "Our best estimate." The Ranger's voice shook. "Hundreds of thousands. Perhaps more. It's impossible to count them all." Vader stood once more atop the wall, gazing north. Even without the Force, he would have been able to see the approaching horde. The night itself seemed to darken where they walked, as if their presence dimmed the very stars. "They come for me," he stated simply. "The Night King perceives me as a threat to his conquest. He brings his full force to break me before I can organize resistance." "Then we're doomed," someone whispered. "No," Vader corrected. "This is advantageous. He brings his army to me rather than forcing me to hunt them across the frozen waste. He consolidates his forces rather than spreading them out. He provides me with a single battle to win rather than a prolonged campaign." He turned to face the assembled commanders. "Send word south. All forces are to converge on the wall immediately. And bring the dragons." Over the following weeks, an army unprecedented in Westeros's history assembled at and behind the wall. Every great house sent troops. The Unsullied marched north in perfect formation. The Dothraki horde, terrified of the sea but more terrified of their Khal's displeasure at disobedience, made the journey. Knights from the Vale, warriors from Dorne, soldiers from the Reach and Riverlands all converged. And Vader planned. The wall itself would be the primary defense, but he ordered modifications. Massive bonfires were constructed at regular intervals, their flames to be maintained constantly. Dragonglass weapons, effective against White Walkers, were distributed widely after Vader himself located and opened ancient caches of the material through Force-assisted archaeology. Trenches were dug, fortifications erected, ballista and catapults positioned. But the most significant preparations were more esoteric. Vader spent hours in meditation, extending his consciousness across the battlefield, mapping every rock and ridge, every possible approach. He could feel the army of the dead advancing, their collective void in the Force like a wound in reality itself. Daenerys approached him during one of these meditations. "Your Excellency, the dragons are restless. They sense what's coming. Even under your control, they feel fear." "Fear is useful," Vader replied without opening his eyes. "It sharpens instincts, but ensure they remain under control. When the battle begins, I will need them." "You truly believe we can win? Against so many?" "Belief is irrelevant. We will win because losing is not acceptable. The Night King has made a tactical error in consolidating his forces. He believes overwhelming numbers guarantee victory. He is wrong. On the night the army of the dead reached the wall, the temperature dropped far below anything the assembled soldiers had ever experienced. Frost formed on armor and weapons. Breath misted so thickly it obscured vision. And then, as the sun set, they came. The army of the dead stretched from horizon to horizon. Wights of every description, human, animal, giant, shuffled forward in a silent tide. White walkers rode undead horses at the army's rear, their presence turning the very air crystalline. And at their center, mounted on an undead dragon, a beast that had died centuries ago and been preserved in ice until the Night King's magic reanimated it, sat the Night King himself. The soldiers on the wall stared in despair at the sheer scale of the enemy force. Even the bravest felt their courage falter. This was not a battle. This was the end of everything. Then Vader stepped forward to the wall's edge, and his voice, amplified by the Force, carried across the entire battlefield. Warriors of Westeros, you face an enemy that has haunted your nightmares for generations. An enemy that knows no fear, no mercy, no fatigue. An enemy that has existed since before your kingdoms were born, waiting for this moment to extinguish all life. You look upon them and you despair. He paused, letting the truth of those words settle. Then his tone changed, becoming harder, more commanding. But they should despair at the sight of you. They face an enemy they have never encountered before. They face soldiers who have put aside their ancient feuds to stand united. They face weapons forged specifically to destroy them. Most importantly, they face me. And I have broken far greater foes than these shambling corpses and their Ice King master. He raised one hand, and the three dragons, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion, took flight, their roars echoing across the frozen waste. As they passed over the wall, they unleashed torrents of flame, illuminating the battlefield in orange and red light. "Let them come," Vader declared. "Let them break themselves upon our defenses, and when they falter, we will show them that death itself can die." The army of the dead charged. The battle began with fire. The dragons, under Vader's direct control, strafed the advancing horde with continuous streams of flame. Whites burned by the thousands, their desiccated flesh perfect fuel. But for every dozen destroyed, 100 more advanced. The sheer numbers seemed infinite. On the wall itself, archers fired volleys of arrows, many tipped with dragon glass or set aflame. Catapults hurled pots of burning oil. The Night's Watch, reinforced by soldiers from across the realm, held the wall's top against whites that began scaling the 700-foot face with unnatural agility. Vader stood at the wall's center, his presence a calm point in the chaos. He did not fight with lightsaber or force lightning, not yet. Instead, he directed the battle with precision, his tactical genius honed across countless campaigns now applied to this medieval warfare. North section. Concentrate fire on the giant whites. Dragons. Focus on the White Walkers attempting to flank east. Reserve forces. To the main gate they're attempting a breach. His commands were relayed instantly by runners, and the army responded with disciplined efficiency. Despite the horror of their enemy, despite casualties mounting by the minute, the line held. But the Night King had not yet truly committed his forces. He hung back, watching, learning. This was his first encounter with organized resistance on this scale in millennia. He was studying his enemy, just as Vader was studying him. Then the Night King made his move. His undead dragon, a massive beast with torn wings and exposed bone, launched into the air. Its mouth opened, and instead of fire, it breathed frost, blue flame that flash-froze everything it touched. The dragon dove toward the wall, its deadly breath carving through stone and defenders alike. Wherever the blue flame struck, soldiers froze solid, their bodies shattering like ice sculptures. Even dragon glass and Valyrian steel could not save them from this assault. Vader watched the attack with calculating eyes. Then he reached out with the Force, and the undead dragon suddenly veered off course, its flight path disrupted. The Night King, maintaining control of his mount through their magical bond, fought against Vader's influence. For a moment, two wills battled for control of the massive creature. Neither could achieve dominance. The dragon thrashed in midair, pulled between two masters of such different but equally powerful abilities. Then, Vader changed tactics. If he could not control the beast, he would remove it from the battlefield. With a tremendous surge of power, Vader hurled the undead dragon away from the wall. The massive creature flew backward as if struck by a giant invisible hand, tumbling through the air before crashing into the army of the dead below, crushing hundreds of wights beneath its bulk. The Night King's eyes narrowed. This dark figure was stronger than anticipated. Time to end this directly. The Night King dismounted from his stunned dragon and began walking toward the wall. As he moved, the temperature dropped even further. The very air froze, creating crystals that fell like deadly snow. Wights parted before him, and White Walkers fell in behind, a honor guard of winter's champions. Vader felt the Night King's approach like a void opening in the Force. This creature was not merely undead or magical, it was something that existed in opposition to life itself. Every step it took diminished the warmth, the energy, the vitality of everything around it. "I'm going down," Vader announced to his commanders. "Your Excellency, that's suicide," Tyrion protested. "Even you can't face that thing alone." "I do not intend to fight alone, but I must be the one to face him directly." Vader turned to Daenerys. "When I engage the Night King, you will take the dragons and burn a path through his army to reach the White Walkers. They are his commanders. Kill them, and vast sections of his force will collapse. And if you fall," she asked quietly, "then you will have bought time for an orderly retreat. The living will survive to fight another day." He paused. "But I will not fall." With that, Vader leaped from the wall. He fell 700 feet, his cape billowing behind him, and landed in the snow with force-enhanced strength that left a crater. Immediately, wights swarmed toward him from all directions. His lightsaber ignited, its crimson blade cutting through the darkness, and he began carving his way toward the Night King. The battle became a storm of motion and violence. Vader moved through the army of the dead like a dark wind, his blade and force powers destroying anything that approached. Wights fell in pieces around him. White Walkers who attempted to intercept him were hurled aside or bisected. Nothing could stop his advance. The Night King watched this display of power and continued his own approach. The two forces of nature walked toward each other across a battlefield of ice and death, and the armies on both sides seemed to pause, sensing that something momentous was about to occur. They met in the center of a clearing that had been burned clean by dragonfire. Around them, the battle raged on, but here, for this moment, there was stillness. The Night King regarded Vader with ancient eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Vader stared back through his mask, his breathing steady and mechanical, betraying nothing of his thoughts. Neither spoke. The Night King had no voice, and Vader saw no need for words. This would be decided through power alone. The Night King raised his hand, and instantly the temperature plummeted to extremes that would kill a mortal in seconds. Vader felt the cold attempting to penetrate his armor, to freeze the blood in his veins, to stop his heart. But his suit's systems, designed to operate in the vacuum of space, adapted and compensated. Vader responded by reaching out with the Force, attempting to crush the Night King as he had crushed so many others. But the Night King's essence was different. It was not life that animated him, but something else, something the Force could grasp but not easily manipulate. It was like trying to crush water. It flowed around his power, resisting direct assault. So they fought more directly. The Night King drew his ice blade, a sword that gleamed with cold blue light. Vader raised his lightsaber, and the weapons clashed. Where the energized plasma met ancient ice magic, reality screamed. The sound of their collision was like shattering glass mixed with thunder, and the shockwave knocked wights flat in a circle around them. They dueled across the frozen battlefield, neither giving ground. The Night King fought with skill accumulated over thousands of years, his style refined through millennia of practice. But Vader had been trained by the greatest lightsaber duelists in galactic history, and his own dark powers enhanced every movement. The Night King's blade did not shatter against the lightsaber as common ice would have. Instead, it held, empowered by magic that existed outside the physical laws Vader knew. But neither could it overcome the lightsaber's cutting power. They were matched, and both knew it. So the Night King changed tactics. He gestured, and from the army behind him, White Walkers began advancing. Not one or two, but dozens, all converging on Vader's position. Vader's response was immediate. He reached out with the Force and pulled 3 dragons into a tight formation above him. Then, with a commanding gesture, he brought them down on the advancing White Walkers in a storm of fire. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion descended like apocalypse itself. Their combined flames created a firestorm that melted snow to bedrock and reduced White Walkers to steaming puddles. The magical ice creatures screamed as they died, their voices like breaking glaciers, and with each one that fell, thousands of whites collapsed as the magic animating them was severed. The Night King observed this with something approaching emotion, rage, perhaps, or frustration. His army was being systematically dismantled by tactics he had never encountered. This dark figure commanded powers unlike anything the Night King had faced in his ancient existence. In that moment of distraction, Vader struck. His lightsaber found an opening in the Night King's defense and drove forward, piercing the ancient ice armor and the frozen flesh beneath. The blade emerged from the Night King's back, crimson light shining through translucent blue. For a heartbeat, the entire battlefield seemed to freeze. Whites stopped mid-stride, White Walkers halted their advance. Even the living held their breath, sensing that something fundamental had just occurred. Then the Night King reached up with both hands and grasped Vader's shoulders. This close, his power was overwhelming, a void of cold and death that sought to drain all life and warmth. Vader felt his systems begin to fail, frost forming on the outside of his armor, ice crystals penetrating his suit's joints. The Night King's eyes blazed, and for the first time, he seemed to speak, though not with words. Images flooded into Vader's mind. The long night, thousands of years of patient planning, the vision of a world frozen and dead, eternal and unchanging. The Night King was not merely a destroyer, he believed he was bringing order, the ultimate order of death, where nothing changed and nothing suffered because nothing lived. Vader understood then. This creature was not so different from himself. They both sought to impose their vision of order upon chaos. They both believed the end justified the means. They both had sacrificed their own humanity for power. But there was one crucial difference. "I have already died once," Vader said, his voice strained but unwavering. "I have been burned, broken, and remade. I know the price of power, the cost of ambition. But I have also learned that some things matter more than order, more than control, more than even survival itself." He thought of Luke, of that moment on the second Death Star when his son had refused to give in to hate, had chosen compassion over power. He thought of his own redemption, of the choice he had made in his final moments of his previous existence. "I will not let this world fall to frozen death, because despite all its flaws, it has something worth preserving. Life itself, in all its messy, chaotic, inefficient glory." With that declaration, Vader channeled the Force as he had never done before. Not with anger or hate, the traditional fuel of the dark side. Not even with the cold precision he had cultivated as the Emperor's enforcer, but with something he had thought lost to him: hope. Golden light, antithetical to the crimson of his lightsaber and the blue of the Night King's magic, erupted from Vader. It was the light side of the Force, pure and undiluted, channeled through someone who had walked in darkness for so long that its emergence was explosive. The Night King released Vader and staggered backward, his form beginning to crack like ice under sudden pressure. The golden light was life itself, vitality and warmth and change, everything the Night King's existence opposed. Where it touched the ancient creature, his frozen flesh began to steam and melt. The Night King tried to summon his power, to call upon the deep cold that was his essence. But Vader pressed forward, lightsaber still embedded in the creature's chest, golden Force energy pouring from him in waves. The two powers, life and death, warmth and cold, change and stasis, collided at a fundamental level. The Night King's form began to shatter. Cracks spread across his body like a frozen lake breaking under spring thaw. His eyes, which had burned with cold blue fire for thousands of years, began to dim. With a sound like a mountain of ice calving into the sea, the Night King shattered completely. His body exploded into thousands of ice shards that melted before they hit the ground. The magic that had sustained him, that had animated his vast army, dissipated like morning fog under a hot sun. Across the battlefield, Every white collapsed simultaneously. White walkers screamed as they dissolved into pools of freezing water. The undead dragon fell from the sky, its reanimation severed, and crashed to earth as nothing more than ancient bones. The army of the dead was no more. Vader stood in the center of a circle of melted snow, steam rising from the ground around him. The golden light faded, and he collapsed to one knee, his systems overloaded from channeling power of that magnitude. But he remained conscious, aware, alive. From the wall, a sound began quietly at first, then building to a roar. The assembled armies of the living were cheering, crying out in victory and relief and disbelief. They had witnessed the impossible. Death itself had died. Daenerys landed Drogon beside Vader, dismounting quickly to offer assistance. "You did it. You actually did it." Vader allowed her to help him stand, his breathing more labored than usual. "The threat is ended. For now." For now. She looked around at the field of motionless corpses. They're all dead. The Night King is destroyed. It's over. Nothing is ever truly over, Dragon Queen. There are always more threats, more challenges. But yes, this particular battle is won. As they made their way back to the wall, Vader's mind was already moving to the next challenge. With the immediate existential threat eliminated, he could focus on rebuilding civilization. But the effort of channeling the light side of the Force had reminded him of something he had tried to forget, that power could be used for purposes other than domination and control. Perhaps this world, so different from the one he had known, could be more than just another empire built on fear and strength. Perhaps here, far from the Emperor's influence, far from the dark side's constant whispers, he could build something better. Or perhaps that was merely exhaustion speaking, and he would return to his natural inclinations once recovered. Time would tell. In the months following the Battle of the Wall, as it came to be known, Vader's grip on Westeros solidified, but it was different from the empire he had served. Yes, there was order. Yes, there was centralized control. But there was also something unexpected hope. The systems he implemented were harsh but fair. Corruption was ruthlessly eliminated, but so was the arbitrary cruelty of nobles who had abused their power. Taxes were collected efficiently, but they were also spent on improving infrastructure, establishing schools, building hospitals. The small folk, so long ground beneath the heel of their betters, began to prosper. Vader remained a figure of fear, his mask and black armor symbols of absolute authority. But he was also coming to be seen as someone who protected rather than merely ruled. When bandits threatened a village, they were dealt with swiftly. When disease struck a city, resources were mobilized immediately. When winter came in full force, the grain stores Vader had ordered built kept the population fed. Daenerys, who had begun as his unwilling servant, found herself becoming something like a partner. She managed the day-to-day governance, while he handled broader strategic concerns. They disagreed, often her instinct for compassion clashing with his preference for efficiency, but slowly, they found a balance. "You're changing," she observed one day as they reviewed reports from across the realm. "When you first arrived, you would have executed those lords for their embezzlement. Instead, you stripped them of their lands and forced them to serve in public works." "Dead men serve no purpose," Vader replied. "These men can still be useful if properly motivated. That is not weakness, Dragon Queen. That is pragmatism. Call it what you will. I call it progress." The dragons, still under Vader's control, were used not for conquest but for rapid transport and emergency response. When avalanches trapped villages in the north, dragons carried rescue teams. When wildfires threatened the Reach, they helped create firebreaks. The creatures that had once been symbols of Targaryen domination became symbols of protection. Not everyone accepted this new order. Rebellions flared, particularly in Dorne and the Iron Islands, where independence was prized above all else. But Vader dealt with each uprising decisively, demonstrating that resistance was futile while also addressing the underlying grievances that had sparked the rebellion in the first place. "You cannot rule through fear alone," Tyrion counseled him during one particularly difficult negotiation with Dornish representatives. "People will follow strength, yes, but they will only truly support a ruler they believe cares about their welfare." I do not need their love, Vader replied. Only their obedience and their prosperity. If they prosper, they will not rebel. If they do not prosper, I have failed in my purpose. And what is your purpose now, if I may ask? Tyrion pressed. You came here by accident, seeking only to return to your own realm. But that seems less urgent to you now. Why? Vader was silent for a long moment, his masked face unreadable. In my galaxy, I served a master who promised order through tyranny. He created an empire that spanned 1,000,000 worlds, but it was built on fear and oppression. I helped him build it, believing it necessary. Perhaps it was, in that place, at that time. He turned to look out over King's Landing, where the city sprawled in the evening light. But here, I answer to no one. Here, I can build something different. Not an empire of fear, but one of, if not love, then at least respect and mutual benefit. It is an experiment. I do not know if it will succeed, but it interests me more than returning to serve someone else's vision ever could. As word spread of Vader's rule and his victory over the Night King, reactions varied across the known world. In Essos, some cities sent embassies seeking trade agreements or protection. Others fortified their defenses, fearing this new power would eventually turn its attention eastward. The faceless men of Braavos watched with professional interest, debating among themselves whether this emperor represented a threat to balance that required their intervention. In the free cities, merchants calculated the profits to be made from a unified Westeros with safe roads and consistent laws. In Ashai, Shadowbinders studied the disturbance in the patterns of magic and debated its meaning. In the ruins of Valyria, things long dormant stirred, sensing that the world was changing in fundamental ways. But for most people, life simply continued, albeit better than before. Farmers tended their crops without fear of raiders. Merchants traveled roads patrolled by disciplined guards. Children attended schools, established in even small villages. Winter, while still harsh, was survivable thanks to adequate food stores and organized distribution. Years passed. Vader aged, though far more slowly than normal humans, his force-enhanced physiology extending his lifespan beyond natural limits. He remained emperor, his grip on power unshakable, but he also began preparing for succession. He had no heirs of his own blood, and he refused to establish a dynasty that might fall into the same patterns of nepotism and incompetence that had plagued previous rulers. Instead, he established a system based on merit. The most capable administrators were elevated to positions of authority. A council was formed to govern in his absence. Schools were built to train future leaders in governance, strategy, and ethics. He was building an empire that could survive without him. "You're thinking about dying," Daenerys said bluntly one day. They stood together on a balcony of the Red Keep, watching dragons wheel through the sky. "I am thinking about legacy," Vader corrected. "Everything ends eventually. Even I will fall, whether to age, to battle, or to some unforeseen circumstance. What matters is what remains after. And what will remain," he gestured broadly at the city, the realm beyond. "A civilization that functions without requiring constant intervention from a single powerful individual. A system of laws and governance that protects the weak while allowing the strong to flourish. A society that can meet challenges through organization and technology, rather than hoping for a hero to save them." Daenerys smiled slightly. "That's almost optimistic, coming from you. It is pragmatic. Heroes are unreliable, systems endure." But even as he spoke, Vader felt something stirring in the Force. A disturbance, distant but growing stronger. Something was coming. Something from beyond this world. The same dimensional instability that had brought him here was opening again. In the privacy of his chambers, Vader meditated deeply, reaching out with the Force to probe this new threat or opportunity. What he sensed made him pause. It was familiar. It was the Kryptonian Collectorate. They had found him. Connell and his cybernetic followers had traced Vader's dimensional signature across the barriers between realities. They had been searching for years, calculating and planning, and now they had the means to breach into this realm, but they would not find an easy target. Vader stood, his decision made. Let them come. He had faced one impossible challenge in the Night King and prevailed. He had built an empire from the chaos of Westeros. If these mechanical Kryptonians thought to take him by force, they would learn what others had learned before them. You could conquer a world, but you could not conquer someone who had already conquered themselves. As Vader prepared for this new threat, as he marshaled the forces of his empire and readied the dragons for battle once more, he felt something he had not experienced in decades' anticipation. Not fear, not mere duty, but genuine interest in the challenge ahead. In this strange world of ice and fire, the Dark Lord of the Sith had found something unexpected. Not redemption that was perhaps too much to hope for. Not forgiveness for his past crimes, those weighed on him still. But purpose. Direction. A chance to be more than he had been, to build rather than merely destroy. And as the dimensional barriers weakened and the shadow of the Collectorate fell across Westeros, Darth Vader, Emperor of the Seven Kingdoms, Breaker of the Night King, Master of Dragons, stood ready to defend what he had built. The Game of Thrones had ended. A new game had begun. And this time, the stakes were higher than any throne. They were fighting for the very future of humanity in a world that had learned hope could come even from the darkest places. Winter had come and been defeated. Dragons had been tamed. Death itself had died. Whatever came next, Westeros would face it not as divided kingdoms, but as an empire. Not perfect, not gentle, but strong. And in the Red Keep, behind a mask of black metal, Darth Vader allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. The Dark Lord had found his light, even if he would never admit it aloud.